Good morning. Thank you all for joining me. My name is Ann Saldivar, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am the on-campus Peace Corps recruiter here at Texas Global at the University of Texas at Austin. And I am here to support students and faculty and staff who are interested in Peace Corps service. I'm going to be sharing this recording on our YouTube page, so even if you are outside of the UT Austin community, this will be helpful for you if you're interested in Peace Corps and the Peace Corps application process. So let me go ahead and get started. Today is an application workshop. I'm going to do sort of a broad overview of what those steps are. And then I'm going to go into kind of the weeds of every little component of that application. If you happen to have any questions, feel free to email me. My email is Peace Corps, all one word, at austin.utexas.edu. If you're not a part of the UT Austin community, you can still reach out to me and then I can connect you to the regional recruiter, or you can find that on the Peace Corps website. All right. So as I said, my name is Ann Saldivar, and I am a returned Peace Corps volunteer, along with 240,000 plus Americans who have served abroad. The mission of Peace Corps is to create relationships, to create friendships and world peace. And we do that by partnering with host countries and typically low-income countries to work on specific projects and community. We do a deep dive into the local language and culture. There's an intense 3-month training, and then you swear in and then serve as a Peace Corps volunteer for 2 years. I served in Jordan in the education sector. I worked with students with profound autism within a special education center and with teachers and parents in the community. The language I spoke during service was Arabic. And I just want to dispel the myth that you have to be fluent or even proficient in a foreign language to apply for Peace Corps, because I know that's one of kind of, people think, oh, well, I haven't had a bunch of international experience, or I don't have a foreign language yet. That's okay. Peace Corps trains you on all of these things. There will be some placements that require language, and it will say in the posting, and I'll get into that a little bit later on. But I studied French and some Spanish, but when I arrived in Jordan, I didn't even know the whole Arabic alphabet yet. And naively, I did not even realize there was a whole other number system. So that was intimidating, but Peace Corps has wonderful language and cultural facilitators who create this very engaging language learning where you're doing role playing and you're writing right away. And by the end of my 2.5 months of training, I was able to take taxis and buses and go shopping and negotiate prices and understand the numbers listed for the prices. And to have, general conversations with folks like, how are you? How's your family? How many sisters do you have? What are you having for dinner? That sort of thing, as well as very sector and project specific vocabulary, like around, autism and special education and behavior and all of those sorts of things. So, and then Peace Corps continued to assist me with an Arabic tutor who helped me, and then ultimately became one of my best community supporters and friends who helped me whenever I had any sort of like formal presentation that, PowerPoints require a whole other level of Arabic formality that I certainly could not have done on my own. So don't let language intimidate you. You do need to be open to learning and just trust the process of that. But if you don't have all of the language or any of the language skills necessary for service, don't let that be a mental block to applying for service. If a certain level of proficiency is required, it will be listed in the opportunity posted online, and we'll get into that. I went to school here in Austin, in South Austin at St. Ed's, where I was an AmeriCorps volunteer. And then I did a master's in global health policy and management. And I did that at the Heller School at Brandeis, utilizing the Coverdell Fellowship, which is an opportunity for returned Peace Corps volunteers to obtain scholarships. And some of these may be little scholarships, some of these may be full scholarships. There are a whole host of higher education institutions involved in the Coverdell Fellowships, and a wide range of opportunities in different subjects. So that is something, if you're even somewhat considering graduate school, that's something you might want to look into. And I also was able to use the federal benefit after doing my schooling. I also worked in the federal government with at the National Institutes of Health. Okay, so the basic requirements for serving in the Peace Corps is you need to be a U.S. citizen. That can be, natural born, naturalized citizen, and you need to be at least 18 years old. And a lot of the posts also require a college degree, but we'll kind of get into more of that in a little while. The length of service for the traditional Peace Corps volunteer service is 27 months. There's 2.5 to 3 months of this intense training. You're with a host family. You are basically going to school full-time, learning the language, the culture, the cultural norms, and sector-specific skills that you need to have when you hit the ground running at your site. And then when you're not in your little school setting with a very small, intense cohort, you are with your host family doing anything and everything. I remember my first month in Jordan, I attended a funeral, a wedding, a birth party. It was a lot. And it was really amazing. And you will really be immersed in the cultural setting and in the community wherever you are doing your Peace Corps training. There are other forms of service. Peace Corps Response offers a shorter term volunteering, but that's typically for people who have master's degrees and extensive work experience. And I'll get into that. But for this application, I'm really talking about the traditional 27-month volunteering. So what makes an applicant competitive? Competitive applicants are typically going to have a college degree. There will be some instances where you can have paid work experience. That's going to be like 5 years in certain sectors like agriculture. You're going to have a tailored professional federal resume. We're going to get into the details of that in a bit. And you're going to have some sort of volunteer experience. You really want to demonstrate that you are involved in your community here and show that you can work with people from different backgrounds, meet people where they are, facilitate projects. You don't have to be the president of an organization, but we want to know that you are involved in community work because that's what you're going to be doing, and it's going to be very intense. And you also really want to do your research on Peace Corps. Read anything and everything on the website. Clearly understand the mission of creating friendships and world peace and what that means, right? That sounds kind of vague, but when you really read into how we work towards that mission, it's, integrating into the communities, meeting the communities where they are, literally speaking their language, getting on the same page, working together on a project. But I would argue more than the project, which of course the project is critically important, or they wouldn't be asking for American support to work on this sort of typically like development project. The relationship building, the people-to-people diplomacy that is necessary to create the conditions for peace and understanding and peace building, that is the mission of Peace Corps. So read anything and everything on the website. Make sure you really know, what are the expectations? What am I getting myself into? It's a 27-month commitment, so you don't want to tread lightly. You want to know what you're getting into and really be on board, not just with the mission and kind of putting the words in place, repeating it back on your application, but really applying it to yourself and really thinking critically, like, what skills do I have? How does my education align? And even if it's not like a perfect match, like I learned English teaching pedagogy, like great. If you did that and you want to teach English, that makes sense. And that's easy to connect those dots. But you could also have been doing, in engineering. I have a lot of engineering students that come that want to work on infrastructure projects, and how are they going to align that with, environment? Well, I volunteered with the sustainability group here on campus. Work to create the narrative of the skills and education and paid and unpaid experiences you had that are going to help make you a successful Peace Corps volunteer. So these are the different program areas, also referred to sometimes as the sectors. So there's agriculture, youth and development, education, environment, health, and community economic development. And these will be seen throughout different Peace Corps programs. I would say every country is going to have some sort of education. Almost every country is going to ask for English teaching, and because English language is such an asset, right? Especially when you are trying to come out of poverty and work on development. So think about what these different sectors are and what you're genuinely interested in doing, and also how your background, again, education, but also paid and unpaid work experience and even hobbies, how you can integrate that into how you would be successful in, whatever, agriculture. Maybe you haven't worked on a farm, but you have a garden, or you participated in a community garden, or you're interested in youth development, you've done some mentoring, or you've even worked, on a seasonal spring break camp. Fine, that wasn't like all year long, but that had a significant, real project. Think about that and how you want to apply that. Also, you'll see here secondary projects. Once you have gone through training and then you go to your site and you start working on your projects in your everyday living and life, you are not just working on this project and you're not just kind of casually doing this, but you are really living in the community. And part of that is also your personal interest, right? So you may be working in youth development, but you might also be an artist, or you might also be a writer, or you might really enjoy doing teaching group exercise classes. I mean, anything and everything you can think of. Perhaps you're a beekeeper, but that's not your primary project, but you might connect with somebody in your community who wants somebody to assist with beekeeping, who, maybe you want to start a school club doing that, or they want someone to come teach whatever your interests are. So you will figure that out. I was a special education volunteer, but I had been working directly in public health for a decade prior. I didn't do Peace Corps until my early 30s. So you're not expected to have a decade of experience, and I didn't even use that for my primary project. But then I did connect with a midwife in my village, and we worked on a holistic women's health, cancer prevention, family planning, all sorts of female health issues for the family. And so that was one of my secondary projects. That's just an example. Also, it's very common to do some sort of like summer camp, maybe even in conjunction with other volunteers in your region. So just know you're going to have your primary project, but that there's going to be opportunities to do secondary projects as well, if you want to and have the time to do so. So this is a map of basically Peace Corps typically is around in 60 countries worldwide. There are reasons, perhaps safety and security reasons rank very high. If there is any sort of unrest, Peace Corps is not going to be putting volunteers at risk. We are here to do people-to-people diplomacy and relationship peace building. And so on this map, there are a handful of countries so Cameroon, Ethiopia, Kyrgyz Republic, and Mozambique right now are not having volunteers. So I know with Mozambique, there were some ongoing security concerns, and then there's also restructuring happening within the agency. So I know volunteers who are in some of these countries are finishing out their service, but they're not bringing new volunteers in currently. And they're always doing an assessment of the health and safety of volunteers because that is the #1 priority. But as you can see, there's something in basically every region. So if there's a specific region you're interested in living and serving in, that is something that you can advocate for when you are looking for opportunities within Peace Corps. So here are some benefits during service. Peace Corps is going to set you up with training. You're going to have a living stipend. You're not making tons of money in Peace Corps. You are going to have enough money to live at the level of your community. You're going to have a modest income. If you're feeling like I need to graduate and make as much money as I possibly can right away, Peace Corps is not for you. But if you want to go have a fulfilling experience, represent your country, represent America abroad, and work with community partners in an international setting, this is something you want to explore. But you will be living comfortably, but within the range of what's considered normal within your community. So I think my stipend was like, I don't know if it was even $200 a month, which sounds crazy here, but that was more than enough for me to always have lots of fresh food and anything I needed for my home. My community partners helped set me up with furniture within the house. And so all of those sorts of things. Housing has been vetted for safety and security. You will have travel benefits. You're going to have time off just like you would at regular jobs, holidays, and within your country context. You're not going to have tons of travel funding, but if you're living at the level of your community, I traveled within the region modestly but comfortably. And then people, if they want, can supplement their travel or whatever with savings or money that they have from home. But we really encourage people when you're at site really to live amongst your community in the same level. There is medical and dental coverage, student loan deferment if these are federal student loans. If you have a private loan, you're going to need to talk to your loan agency about possible deferment or some sort of altered payment plan. And that's, your responsibility for that. But for federal loans, those will be deferred without issue. And then obviously you're going to have a lot of career skills and training building happening throughout training and then throughout your service. There are health benefits. So each country has a medical professional, maybe it's a doctor or a nurse practitioner, but you basically have an on-call medical professional in case anything comes up. You can call them directly and get assistance. You'll have your own little like medical kit to take care of yourself. And then if you need, an x-ray or some bigger concern, Peace Corps is going to get you, into the capital city or where you need to go to have, further treatment or diagnosis done. There are also security officers that are assigned specifically to Peace Corps. So Peace Corps is its own federal government with its own modest budget, and we have our own separate office away from the embassy. It's important that we are our own community. But the country director, American country director, will sit on the security meetings at the U.S. Embassy complex where you are serving in country. So if anything is going on, all monitoring, any sort of safety communications, Peace Corps is fully aware of everything going on and has their own security personnel. And you're going to be talking about deterring issues and cultural awareness, right? Not just to be a gracious guest within your host community, but also for safety and security reasons. Some like the way you dress in one place may be really disrespectful and put you at risk somewhere else. Or, it could be offensive to do something that's nothing here. So those sorts of things you'll learn throughout training, and there's just always a constant thread of security and communication to you. And Peace Corps is always going to err on the side of being overly cautious with volunteers. You're going to have community immersion training. I already kind of said that. And then there's, if you do run into an incident, there is dedicated victim advocacy. It is every day that we go out into the world, there are risks associated with that, whether that's unwanted attention or harassment, or unfortunately, assaults have happened. When those things happen, there is specific victim advocacy available and support available for volunteers. We don't hope for that, but we anticipate that that is something that can and does unfortunately happen. So those resources are put in place and mandated by policy like the Kate Pusey Act, for example. So benefits after service. So you'll approximately receive $10,000. So if you do the 27 months. So you accrue a certain amount of money per month as you serve. And at the end, assuming you did the 27 months, it would be a $10,000 readjustment allowance. Maybe you're going to use that to travel. Maybe you are using that towards getting an apartment, a used car. Maybe you're putting that towards education. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's yours. There are a few programs that are being piloted in high-need areas where there is a higher fund available, but that's very specific to certain openings. So typically it's going to be $10,000 readjustment allowance. You're also going to have a wider professional and career service networking with, the hundreds of thousands of returned Peace Corps volunteers, no matter where you are in the US. And especially if you're interested in government work or international work, but really all facets of society within all sorts of communities, there is a wide networking available for you. There are federal employment advantages. So when you return for, I think it's a year, you have non-competitive eligibility for federal jobs. So if you go on to usajobs.gov right now and you fill out their template, which takes a lot of time, but is worth doing, it will be very difficult unless you are military, unless you have previous federal service. It's very difficult to get your foot in the door at agencies just because it is so competitive. But as a returned Peace Corps volunteer with non-competitive eligibility, that means you are not competing against the general public, but you are at the level of current federal workers. And so you have a hiring priority. There are some specific agencies and positions that use the non-competitive eligibility as a specific hiring mechanism for typically entry level, but sometimes even mid-level positions. So, I thought, whatever, I'm not planning to live in DC, not interested in federal service at all. And then when I returned back to the States, I very much landed in the DC area doing global health work at a federal agency. I was at NIH, which is the National Institutes of Health. They have 27 institutes and centers, and I was at the National Cancer Institute. So never say never when you see different benefits as you're going through the process, especially as your service is ending and you're learning about transitioning back to American life or traveling or whatever it is you plan to do after service. Look at all of the options and really take in the information because, never say never. You may end up in DC and be interested in that, or there are several federal jobs that are not even in the DC area, right? So just putting that on your radar. Also, public service loan forgiveness may be an option for you. There is access to affordable health insurance while you transition into your new role following Peace Corps service. And as I mentioned before, if you're even thinking about possibly going back to school, check out the Coverdale Fellows graduate program. You can find that on the Peace Corps website or just Google Coverdale Fellows and you'll see different universities throughout the US who have different levels of scholarships available. It varies widely on programs, it varies widely on funding. So just look through there and just kind of get an idea. So once you're applying to Peace Corps, these are the main steps. And let me see if I can, I'm trying to remove myself so you can see the full screen. Okay, I'm not sure exactly how to do that. All right, so you'll start off by browsing opportunities and then you will apply, do a health history interview. Let me just do this, disappearing. Get an invitation, do medical and legal clearances, onboarding and departing. But, these are the 8 steps. These browsing and applying, these first 2 steps are what you have the most control over and what you really want to be focused looking at right now as you're considering Peace Corps service or actively applying for service. You want to take the time to go to the website, not only make yourself as educated as possible on the mission of Peace Corps and the 3 goals and the different sectors, but really read about them, think about connecting your dots. What are you interested in? What are you passionate about? What do you also think you are skilled? How can you be most helpful? And how are you going to connect those dots between education and paid and volunteer work experience and that position that you're interested in or that region you're interested in? As I said, you have to be at least an 18-year-old US citizen, but there's no upper age limit. There are not a ton of people that do it in midlife, right? Because you get you have a house, a mortgage, and kids and whatever. so it still mostly skews younger out of undergrad and graduate schools, but there is also a growing cohort of people doing career shifts in the middle and much more so 50 plus volunteers. So there are going to be people who may have some expertise in the program that they're applying for, but by and large, it's mostly younger Americans applying for these positions, and no one is expecting you to be an expert. Most people are not, having their master's and PhD or 10, 20 years of experience. And even if you do, you want to come in with this growth mindset because you're doing it in a different setting from where you were doing the work before, possibly in a whole different language. So don't get too worried about, oh, well, I'm not an expert. If it's something you're interested in and you can connect the dots to your experiences, even if it's volunteering in that realm, but you can express your passion for it and why you would be a good person to do that, you have the task of figuring that out. And then applying is everything we're going over into the weeds about today. And then after you apply, they'll send you your form with your health history, and then we'll go on to the other steps. And I'm going to go through all of these steps individually. So let's just skip ahead. You have options where you want to serve. So when I applied, I just applied at large. They said, you're invited to serve here doing this. And it was a bit of a shock for me because I had been working in HIV services. I had studied French. So I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to be going to West Africa, working in HIV. This is great. I knew I wanted to continue doing public health work following service, but they really had a need for people who had experience with autism. And I had a year of experience working in early childhood intervention, including with some young children with autism, and also volunteering to assist in some programming for a family member with profound autism. And so that was where they needed me to go. I'm very grateful for my experience. I'm grateful that I never in a million years did I imagine, oh, in my 30s, I'll just like go move to the Middle East and learn Arabic and work with people with autism. Like that was nowhere on my radar. And it was a very fulfilling experience on multiple levels, professionally, personally. Definitely the cultural exchange was something I had never experienced before. And so, and also, I was one of the volunteers who advocated for greater transparency and are people entitled because they get to choose what sector or what region? I don't think so. I think that it's important that you are invested in wanting to learn the language and wanting to be curious about this region. If you are a pre-med student and you want to get some real life experience working in healthcare before applying for med school, you should be able to explicitly say, I'm willing to go wherever, but I want to do health, and this is why. And that makes sense. And same for anything and everything, right? Um, I have a family history working in, my family owns a farm. I've been working in engineering. I want to work in my family's farm operations afterwards. I want to focus on agriculture or whatever your reason. You get to explain where you want to go and what you want to do. If you want to go and serve where you're needed most, that's an option. But I want to say you really need to be prepared to go anywhere and do anything. Think, do you feel comfortable going to, I served with my spouse and I couldn't believe it when we were interviewing with the placement officer and he said, I don't want to be on an island. It's like, what in the world? But, that's his thing. He felt uncomfortable going to an isolated island somewhere out in the Pacific that, is your thing. Maybe there's certain bugs or certain things that you're just like, you know what, I couldn't live somewhere where I need a mosquito net, or, whatever it is. I think that we're all adults, and it's great that you know what your boundaries and your preferences are, to make yourself feel like you can really fully commit to the project for 27 months. So don't be shy about stating preferences, but if you are willing to serve anywhere where you're needed most, awesome. We need people like you. And I know you're out there, but not a lot of people fall into that category. So just really be honest with yourself when you're looking at the opportunities, and think about where they are and what you're doing and why you genuinely think you're a good fit for that. So for the application, once you have all your materials, assuming your resume is ready to go, you've thought about your motivation statement, you go on and enter this stuff. It shouldn't take maybe an hour to do. But as I've said, and I'll continue to say, make sure to do your research on Peace Corps and service in advance, because the motivation statement is just as important as your resume. They want to know, we want to know, why Peace Corps, why you, why right now. It's a big commitment. We are a very modestly funded federal agency. So we want to make sure, if we're investing in like getting your passport and flying you halfway around the world, that it's something that you really want to do and commit to, right? Which it is voluntary. And, if you get to your placement for whatever reason, or there's an emergency back home, you are able to separate at any time. And that's your choice. But I wouldn't go into the application thinking, oh, well, if I'll just try this, and then if I don't like it, I'll just go home, right? I don't think most people do that. But they want to know you're really committed to this, and why you're committed to this, right? So this is your time. So you will go to peacecorps.gov, and this is what you're looking for: Peace Corps volunteer. This Peace Corps response, like I said, that's more for people with a decade plus experience, master's degree, really specialized in doing a shorter term program. And you may be eligible for that, but today I'm just focused more on the traditional Peace Corps volunteer, because I primarily work mostly with undergraduate students. So Peace Corps volunteer is going to be what you're most likely qualified to do. So you're going to go there, click browse openings. And then once you're filling out the application, I'm going to just go through the pages. This is what it's going to look like. And let's just look at it together so you can see and know what to expect when you open up your application. So this is the first part. You're stating your citizenship. Are you at least 18? Yes. And then putting in your basic contact information. So then you're going to add your resume. The resume, it doesn't need to be like the most succinct one page. We want to know the details. And the next slide, I'm going to go into what it looks like with the different sections of the resume. And if you're a student here at UT, feel free to reach out to me through the Texas Global website, or email me directly, peacecorps@austin.utexas.edu. If you've met with me already, you probably already have the resume template, but I'm happy to share that with you just so you can see how to break down the sections with the critical information that you're going to want to share on your Peace Corps application and resume. Not all of these things will apply to a typical job, right? No matter if you're doing Peace Corps or a summer job, or, a corporate job, whatever, you want to tailor your resume for the job, the specific skills. Obviously you don't want to embellish and put exaggerated or false information about yourself, but you want to connect the dots as honestly and as clearly as you can as to why you're the person to do this right now. Okay, so tailor it specifically for the sector, maybe even the region, right? And again, unless the position says you need a certain proficiency in Spanish or French or whatever, you don't have to do that. But if you have a connection to the language or you have language skills, you want to put that there. Okay, if you have tutoring experience, include how many hours a week was that? What age group was that? Especially like if you're volunteering for youth development, or maybe you worked with college level, they want to know that. Have you volunteered in any capacity? Again, include your hours, describe the event, how it was a success, or what was the impact, or maybe it wasn't great, but you learned something from it. What was that? Include relevant classes in your education, and upload transcripts now or later. If you have your transcripts, I think it's better to cover all of your bases, have all of your information, even if it's an unofficial transcript. So we're going to look here at this resume, and I know this looks kind of overwhelming. Let me see if I can just come out of the shot for now. So obviously you're going to want your name to be big and bold. Oh, shoot. Sorry. I was trying to do the highlight. There we go. All right. So you're going to want your name there. You're going to want to, sorry, this is really small over here. So you want to put your email, all of your contact information, all of your key qualifications here, right? I'm a bilingual professional. I'm fluent in Spanish. Again, you don't have to be, but if you are, highlight that. Any sort of cultural exchange, if you're applying for youth development and you've been a youth leader, that's the place you want to put that. And then professional experience, volunteer activities, education, and you can put things like study abroad on here too. I've even put study abroad experiences on resumes where it made sense, right? Like right now, I'm working in a global center. When I worked in global health, that highlighted that I had gone above and beyond to have multicultural interactions and trainings, and gone out of my comfort zone, right? So put that there. And then there's specialized skills and training that can be computer, language, certifications, training, right? Anything. Were you a lifeguard? You are CPR certified. You were trained to lead a class. You have any sort of explicit computer skills, right? What are the computer programs that you are proficient in, for example? Okay, so whoops. Sorry, I accidentally opened the chat. So again, if you're a UT student and if we've met, I've probably shared this with you already. If not, feel free to email me. I'm happy to share this template with you. Also, if you're outside of the UT Austin community, you're welcome. I'm happy to share this with you and connect you with the appropriate regional recruiter. What was I going to say? In my capacity here as the on-campus recruiter, I fortunately get to work here full-time at Texas Global, but I work within Education Abroad. So 20 hours a week, I'm on the Education Abroad team helping with certain projects, but then I'm the on-campus Peace Corps recruiter 20 hours a week. That is a federal contract with Peace Corps headquarters. I liaise with them. And so in this capacity, I do class talks, I do group talks. If you have a class, if you have a student group where you would want me to come present, reach out to me. Mostly I work one-on-one with students to kind of talk about questions they have, and maybe they're nervous about something and they want to talk about it, I'm happy to have private conversations, advising either online or in person. I often do resume reviews. And also, I'm not going to tell people, say this in your motivation statement, but I'm happy to give you feedback or kind of, brainstorm with you, like, what is your goal applying here, and kind of help you draw out your specialized skills that you want to make sure to highlight on the resume and within the motivation statement. So I'm available for that. Other Peace Corps recruiters are available for that. And then once you apply, I don't have any access to that portal. That goes on to a placement officer at headquarters and the medical and legal team for clearances. But I just wanted to make sure that was clear to students and staff here at UT, whether you're undergrad, graduate, I'm available to help you with that. If you're a student elsewhere and you just happen to come upon this video, hopefully it's still helpful to you. I would look and see if you have a recruiter at your campus. Most campuses do not have that, but UT happens to be, it's a huge university, and we happen to be the largest recruiter of Peace Corps volunteers within Texas and within the top 10 nationally. We were actually within the top 5 of graduate students entering into Peace Corps service this past year. And so that is why I'm here in this kind of strategic campus recruiter position. We also have a Peace Corps prep certificate program. This is a self-paced Canvas course where you are aligning your schoolwork, but also volunteer experiences with a specific sector. And you meet one-on-one, either online or in person, with our faculty advisor, lovely Michelle Hockett Cooper, is our current faculty advisor for the Peace Corps prep program. And she is also a returned Peace Corps volunteer. She served in Kazakhstan and works within the nutrition department here. She gets people set up with the Peace Corps prep certificate program. And then part of that is doing a resume review, doing a mock interview. And so she'll refer people to me for that. I usually don't do the mock interviews with people until they have their interview set up with Peace Corps, but I'm available for that. And so, what else? Yeah. So look and see if you have a Peace Corps prep certificate program at your school. If you're here at UT Austin, you do, and you can find more information on the Texas Global website. And then also I'm available here. But I just want to mention that because oftentimes students aren't even aware that I'm here. I do outreach I table at events. We post things on social media, but it is so big here that sometimes this flies under the radar. So share the information with your classmates. Feel free to invite me to come to any class talks or introduce me to professors, if that sounds like something that might be helpful. Okay, so going on with the application, have you previously served in Peace Corps? Have you applied to Peace Corps in the past? This isn't going to go against you. They just want to know. Some people, I served with people who were serving in their second country of service. Like they applied while they were in another country finishing service. They wanted to continue. One of my colleagues, she wanted to learn Arabic. So specifically requested to be in Jordan at the time. So, and then I also know people who have applied in the past and get in for whatever reason, and then decided, I'm going to get a little bit more experience and then reapply. That's fine too. But in this isn't going to be an issue, but they just want to note that and see, if anything, it shows your commitment to really wanting to serve. If you are serving as a couple, and a lot of this doesn't apply to most students, but you apply at the same time. You do separate applications, but then you will mark this area. Are you married or in domestic partnership? Yes, no. And so yes, then they will ask for your partner's information so that they can, like, after they look at you separately, look at it together, to see where they would place you, right? Because you have to have medical clearance. You may be cleared, but your partner may have a medical issue that can't be handled in the area where you wanted to go or where they thought you might be a good fit. So it requires a little bit more coordination. Also, when you're looking at opportunities and you're looking, you can look through sector, keywords, language, region, and also couples. You can click saying couples, because not every country, I guess, can always support couples. I'm not sure why. I think many of them do, but that's something you want to be looking for if that's your situation. So you must be legally married or sign an affidavit that says you're in a long-term committed relationship. And I don't know exactly all the intricacies of how long you have to be in that relationship. If you have a question about that, I can find out. And I'm happy to connect you to the appropriate resource at headquarters. And that's true for everything, right? If there's something I can't answer, I'll find that out for you or connect you to the person who has the answer. If there are specific legal questions or health questions, even if I think I know the answer, I'm not going to answer because that's not my job here. I'm not a medical officer. I'm certainly not a legal officer. Okay, moving on, dependents. If you have children, Peace Corps is not for you. There are, as I mentioned before, a growing number of older adults who are going into service. So they want to make sure your dependents are not depending on you, right? People who are serving maybe after retirement, they are their children are grown, right? So you need to answer these questions. Are there any persons partially or totally dependent upon you for support, whether or not they're living with you, right? So if somebody is depending on you, this isn't going to be an option. So, your kids really need to be at least 18 years old and really independent. Now, for military service, I sometimes get this question. Now, how do I move to get out of the way? Okay, so Peace Corps welcomes applications from veterans and active duty military personnel. You obviously are committed to serving America, and that is appreciated and understood. I actually had two different women in my cohort. One was an Army officer, nurse, and one was in the National Reserves in her home state. And I don't know all of the details of how they were able to do leave, but they did, and they were successful volunteers. The one in the reserves went on to join the Air Force and become an officer. So, but Peace Corps cannot interfere with any reserve obligations. You are probably going to need to get, here, let me just highlight it here. You're probably going to require written confirmation from your commanding officer, right? So if you're interested in the military, don't think, oh, well, that's not for me, I can't do it. You might. So, have a conversation with us, especially before you apply, right? Because you don't want to work on all these materials if you're not eligible, but many people are. Now, we're also going to ask you about your legal history, and this is reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And when it comes to legal and health, I mean, your whole application, right? You need to be honest. But definitely, some people may be like, oh, well, that was so long ago. Maybe something happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago. That's expunged from my record. You still need to put it on there. And then there will be a conversation with the legal department. Failure to disclose any sort of legal history, as well as I'll go into the medical clearance in a minute. that is a red flag that you're not being completely honest, and it's going to come out in the background check, and it's not going to be good. So, it's your responsibility to inform Peace Corps promptly throughout the application process up through the start of service of all new arrests, charges, citations, misdemeanors, and felonies, including drug and alcohol related legal incidents, right? And uh, for me, I had to show up in court on behalf of a client. I was doing social work, and in the lead up to me leaving for service, I got a notification that I needed to come be a witness in a court case. So that was very unexpected. I was able to do a recording of my testimony before I was able to leave for service, and then they were able to use that. But things pop up. Some things you're gonna know if you have some things on your record, and you need to be transparent about that. But then other things might pop up while you're in the process, right? So I received that notification to go to the DA's office very shortly before we left for service. So, things pop up. It was okay. It was not anything that I had done wrong, but I needed to testify on behalf of the agency I worked for and my client. So, drug and alcohol policy. An applicant with any drug-related conviction or public intoxication, driving under the influence, driving while intoxicated, or with a conviction of reckless driving after initially charged with DUI or DWI, or similar alcohol-related conviction, not eligible to have his or her application for Peace Corps service considered until 12 months has passed from the date of the incident. You are going to need to deal with your situation, not just from a legal standpoint, but just from a health and safety. Not just for the reputation of Peace Corps, which is important, but you want to make sure that mentally and physically you are ready for service. And so that is where that is coming from. So you're going to want to read this policy, confirm that you've read this. And then, have you ever been cited, arrested, charged with, or convicted of these offenses in the last 5 years? Yes or no? Okay. Again, be honest, because it's all going to come out. One of the things that will outright disqualify people is going to be direct intelligence work. It's really, it can, with people coming into the community, some of the communities may have never met an American before. You're speaking their language, you're coming in maybe to work with a vulnerable population, and they're wondering, why are you here? It's not uncommon for people to worry that you are a spy. I mean, that is something that happens. And so Peace Corps has a long-standing policy excluding individuals who have engaged in intelligence activity or related work, or who have been employed or connected with an intelligence agency from becoming Peace Corps volunteers, serving as Peace Corps volunteers, either for a specific period of time or permanently, depending on the agency. So if you have any sort of questions about you or a close family member possibly working directly or indirectly with intelligence, you want to direct any questions to this email, legalplacement@peacecorps.gov. I'm not going to be able to answer that question for you. If you've been working directly in intelligence, I'm going to tell you Peace Corps is not for you. And then also on the flip side, people who think, oh, I've had a student come up to me saying, I'm working in international relations and I want to do intelligence work. I'd love to go learn the language and culture. I say, this is not it. It's important to have distance from the intelligence community. And also, if you do think you are considering working in intelligence in the future, there's kind of a cooling off period. So if you ever worked in intelligence directly, you're not going to be able to work for Peace Corps or as a volunteer. But if you want to do intelligence work following Peace Corps service, there's kind of a cooling off period. I want to say it's at least 5 years. Again, if you have specific questions about specific agencies, legal placement at peacecorps.gov right here, this email that I am highlighting down here is where you're going to want to reach out. Okay, so education, often it says here 95% of the requests want to have volunteers who have a college degree. We recognize that not everybody has access to college. You know, the people I'm working with here at UT, obviously you're working towards your college degree, but I just want to state this in case somebody else is watching this session or has a friend or family member who is very skilled, but maybe doesn't have a college degree or has, you know, maybe an associate's. So, this is something that comes from the host country there where they're asking for this qualification. Let's see. Work experience can be substituted for some agriculture or youth development. Oops. Agriculture or youth development positions. Right here it says that. Okay, so on your application, you're going to have this space to put, you know, your major, minor, GPA, type of degree. You don't need to have a minor, you don't have to have all of this. It's just there for people who do have that to put that information in. Foreign language ability. And I just want to really underscore this. Speaking a foreign language is not required for Peace Corps service because I think that's sort of a mental block for people. They think, well, I'm not competitive enough because like my Spanish is terrible, or I just took this basic level of whatever, or I study this language and that's only spoken in a country where Peace Corps doesn't serve. Peace Corps is going to train you very heavily on language, and cultural awareness and sector specific requirements. So just, you don't need to have proficiency or fluency in the language, but you do have to have the growth mindset. You have to just decide, if I go do this assignment, I have the capability of learning this language. For a lot of people, they're just like, you know, because I'm a certain age or I never became fluent in another language, they just decided like they couldn't. And I even had a moment of like, what have I put myself into? Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize there's this whole different way of writing numbers. Like, what? But they said, and trust the process, just do it, just keep showing up. And like I said earlier, by the end of training, I had like intermediate high level of speaking Arabic. You know, could I write? Not well, but it didn't matter. I didn't need to do a lot of writing for work. It was mostly verbal. And for all of the life skills that I needed to put into practice while living in my community as well. So don't let that block you. On the other hand, I will say, even if you're not fluent, even if you just have a low level or whatever language you studied, put that on there. It shows that you're making an effort, that you have an ability, even if it's not super high level fluency, that you have this ability and desire to learn languages. Okay. Then this section, you can put region, sector, availability preferences. So again, you can be very specific and say, I want to apply for this opening as a health volunteer in, you know, the Gambia. Or you can say, I'm willing to go anywhere and do anything, or I don't care what region I'm in, but I really want to do youth development, or I'd like to do agriculture in South America. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You're allowed to have preferences that they're not going to knock you for that. And again, if you are willing to go anywhere and do anything, that's awesome, but really be prepared to go anywhere and do anything, okay? They're going to match your skills and education to the needs. But you can put geographic regions. If you have a preference, put that there. And then this box right here is very important. It's small, but I always tell people, do not ignore it. Use that space. You want to be succinct, you want to be clear. But if you, again, I want to do health in Africa, I want to do agriculture in Asia. I have no geographic preference, but I want to do youth development. I have a background in Spanish, and I really would like to go somewhere where I could gain fluency and learn some of the indigenous language. Whatever your reason is, whatever your preference is, state it. Because I have been told placement officers read that, and take that into consideration when they're trying to match you with a place where you are cleared for health and whatever. And you want to have options available. It's okay to say, I'm applying. What most people do is they apply for a specific opening, like a specific sector job, in a specific country with a specific start date, right? But then they'll also check a box saying, I'm open to other opportunities, just to kind of keep options open. Because there are sometimes with health clearances, things that are very normal, very easily treated here in the US. Maybe you have asthma, but it's not even like, maybe it's seasonal or whatever, it's not a big deal. But this country, it may not be obvious to you, the air quality there doesn't allow them to send people with asthma, or people who are allergic to bees cannot go to this area, or maybe you take a medication that's obviously totally legal and prescribed here, but it's not legal in this other country. There are all sorts of things happening in the background that, I don't know all, I'm just kind of using these examples. I don't even know what countries have what where, but the medical team knows that. And so it is good to have some flexibility. But if you want to be in a specific country doing a specific thing, it's okay to just say, I want to do that or nothing. So just get clear with yourself about why you want to go, where you want to go, and why you're the person for that. Okay. And so this is kind of an extension of what I was just saying. So you can put, flexible to serve in all sectors, right? Or put your specific sectors. You can put multiple ones, maybe, well, youth development or teaching. There's some overlap and whatever. Those both interest me. Check those. But if you have any desire to serve in other areas, put that down too. And when there's spaces to put comments, don't go on and on. You want to be clear, you want to be succinct, but use that space to express your why, okay? And don't be shy about it. So here's the motivation statement, and it's only 500 words, which is very brief. And again, I'm going to repeat myself. You want to be clear. You want to cut to the chase. You want to be succinct. You have to. You have 500 words. But they want to know why you want to be a Peace Corps volunteer. Why Peace Corps? Is there something about the mission? Is there something about the sector? Is there something about you and your future goals? Right. I have several students who are pre-med. Well, I want to go out and get some real world experience before I enter medical school. Or, I know I want to do global health, so I want to have a global experience before I'm my time is more restricted in medical school or whatever, you know, just you get to connect the dots as to why you want to do this with Peace Corps right now. And again, I am not going to tell students what to write, but if you want to share your motivation statement with me, I'm happy to give you feedback like, you know, this is not quite clear enough, or, you know, why this, you know, pull that out a little bit more, that sort of stuff. I'm here to help with that. And if you are not in the UT community, if you are at a university or college that does not have an on-campus recruiter or Peace Corps prep certificate program, you don't need to have those. Ask a professor, connect with the Returned Peace Corps volunteer group here in Austin. Excuse me. There is the Heart of Texas Peace Corps Association. It's HOT, HOTPCA.org. You can go to their website. They post a lot of information about events from like coffee meetups and food truck meetups and volunteer activities for gardens and cleanups and all sorts of things. And we have like, I'm a member of it. We have a monthly like potluck and annual meeting, you know, where we talk about who's going to be on the board and what do we want to work on. And we raise money to give very modest grants to Peace Corps volunteers, right? So you can reach out to those sort of affinity groups. They're not just for returned Peace Corps volunteers. They are also resources for people interested in Peace Corps. You know, you can go onto those groups and say, you know, I'm applying. I would love for somebody to give me some feedback on my motivation statement, or I would love to talk to somebody who has, you know, served as, you know, a specific religion out in a different culture, or, you know, whatever, any sort of identity where you might want to connect with somebody from that specific identity, or in this case of the motivation statement, if you could give me feedback, or I'd love to just talk to somebody who served, you know, in this specific country, or I'd love to talk to somebody that served as a health volunteer the past 5 years. People are happy to talk about their experiences. People are happy to connect. And we all want to, you know, help in any way we can to encourage, you know, quality applicants to continue the mission of Peace Corps service. So don't be shy. And then also don't be worried if you don't have somebody like me on your campus. Just reach out to your community. Or even if you are here on the UT campus, and you can meet with me, but also you can ask your friend to look at it, or you can ask a professor who's a returned Peace Corps volunteer or works in international work or whatever. So just don't be shy about having eyes on your application elements and allowing people to give you feedback. Now, kind of to use that as a jumping point. When it comes to references, also don't be shy about reaching out to professors. You know, maybe it was a really big class. Maybe you didn't know the professor super well, but you can say, you know, in this critical thinking writing course, I learned XYZ, or, you know, just X, and I really anticipate using that in my service as I apply to teach in Peace Corps. And I would say when you email professors or supervisors, anyone as a reference, just cut to the chase, directly ask right away, and just be very succinct. Say, you know, I'm so-and-so, I was in this class, I benefited from this, and I wondered if you would feel comfortable writing a reference for me. And then paragraph 2, for Peace Corps, I would need your name, email, phone number. Peace Corps will email you a short form to fill out. And then leave it at that. And then cast a wide net. Sometimes professors are out of town for the summer, or you can't get a hold of, maybe you worked somewhere 2 summers ago and that supervisor no longer works there. You can reach out to a coworker. you want to keep it as professional as you can. So even if it was an unpaid situation, if it was a student group, if it was especially an ongoing volunteer, if you can get somebody from that agency, you went to the food bank, 2 weeks every month, 2 weekends every month, or whatever it is, you can go to that agency, say, hey, I'm so and so, I came with this group this many times, I'm applying for Peace Corps. Would you feel comfortable writing me this recommendation? Just ask, because we want it to be relevant to the experiences that you're presenting in your resume. And it says you can use a close friend, but I would really discourage you from doing that. It's not professional. If you're applying and you're like, oh my gosh, the deadline's right now, and I can only get a hold of a friend, use it for just one. And definitely, as it states here, no relatives. So you want to just keep things as professional as you can, right? If you can't get a hold of a supervisor, maybe you can have a coworker. That's different. That's not a friend. That's a work colleague. So, if you need tips on how to reach out, because I know it can be intimidating to ask people, you're like, oh, I don't want to put more work on somebody's plate, but it's really not. And a lot of people, especially professors, they're used to being asked. And if you can just cut to the chase, tell them what the very small ask is, what they need to expect, what they would need to provide, you're good. Okay. This part, request for racial and ethnic data, is purely voluntary. This is completely separate from your application. This is just Peace Corps collecting data to see if volunteers out in the field representing Peace Corps are representing the wide variety of backgrounds within the United States. So again, this is voluntary, but it's just for internal Peace Corps information. So if you don't feel comfortable, don't worry about it. So the final steps are going to be certification. You want to you want to review your application materials, make sure everything's correct. You're certifying everything in here is correct, inappropriate, whatever. So, and then you do your digital signature, save and continue. Okay. Then after you apply, you're going to be emailed a health history form. Peace Corps, again, there are certain health conditions that are no big deal here, but maybe the medication, maybe the air quality there, or other factors that are not obvious prevent people with certain conditions from serving in certain countries. And again, I don't know the details. I'm not on the medical clearance team. They have a dedicated team there. It can seem sort of a little disconcerting if you don't get clearance for a place that you had your heart set on. But I'm telling you, truly, Peace Corps has the best intentions of really prioritizing volunteers' health and safety. And so that's the intention behind this. And so also you want to be very honest and clear about your background. I have heard of applicants saying, well, I went to therapy, but it was no big deal. It was like one time. Well, then when they're looking at your health history and they say, why didn't you mention that? It causes a red flag. So just put everything there, and then there'll be conversations, and don't worry about it excluding you, because more often than not, it won't. So after submitting your application, and you may, in your health forms, you may receive notification that you're under consideration. They may give you a possible list of countries where you can be medically supported, and then there'll be ongoing conversations, right? Because we want to make sure your health and safety is maintained at the highest level, and then also that you're possibly committing to service where you are wanting to serve and able to commit to the 27 months. Okay, so medical and legal clearance, excuse me. You are going to provide additional medical and legal information. The medical team will certify all of this. It will include doctor's exams. It's not super invasive or extensive. It's just you're going to your doctor for a basic physical exam, going over your health history. For the legal clearance, part of that will be fingerprint and background check. If you've done any work with youth, especially in schools, you've probably already done this. This is not like the State Department where they're going and talking to all of your neighbors and coworkers for the last decade, right? But they do there is going to be a background clearance. You'll get the final okay from medical and legal offices and any next steps. Depending on your country, there may be required medication or vaccines, and that's all very country specific. And so that information, it's going to just be this ongoing communication as you prepare to leave for service. Let's see. So for legal paperwork, you want to submit these as soon as possible in case, like I told you, I had a pop-up of, oh, we actually need you in your professional capacity to show up at as a court witness. I was like, what? And but it was fine. And so things, may pop up and it's fine. You just communicate that, but then you want to, get the paperwork going so that you can keep moving in a forward direction towards service. And this is also going to include passport and visa applicant information that you'll be sending to Peace Corps. All right, so all of this goes through, you're giving the invitation and there's the little asterisk saying contingent on the ability to receive legal and medical clearance, of course. So you will accept your invitation. Congratulations. So yeah, if you get to this point, sometimes people will be like, oh, I got it, but am I really ready to go? Have conversations. It's okay if you decide to do a different opportunity. We want you to feel comfortable and ready to commit to the 27 months. So it's okay to give yourself time to think and respond and reach back out to recruiters or other Return Peace Corps volunteers to have these conversations. Then you will have onboarding sent to you. This will be in the 2 months before you're leaving for your country of service. And it'll have, information on what to expect, what you need to do, packing, emergency contact information, student loan information, all these sorts of financial paperwork that you may need to submit to, for student loans and bank information and things like this. And then it'll be time to depart for service. Very exciting time. Usually you will begin with your cohort training within the US. Here, let me move to the side. And you will, it's called staging, and you'll meet typically in a major city in the US. Peace Corps pays for your flight there, right? All of your flights are paid for that are business related to Peace Corps. Going to onboarding, to country, returning from country at the end of service. If you want to travel back home in between, then that is on you. So keep that in mind. Family are welcome to come visit you as well. Lots of people will travel within their region and maybe their family will come to their site or the region or meet halfway if you're really far. But just keep that in mind. You will meet up with your cohort and just go over, make sure everyone has their 2 bags of luggage they're allowed and it's the right size, and we have all your Peace Corps passports, and make sure everybody is ready to go and feeling comfortable and meeting each other before you travel together to go serve for the next 27 months. Okay, I hope that this was helpful. I went over, but hopefully that was sharing information that's helpful to you all. So be in touch. Again, my name is Ann Saldivar. I'm here at Texas Global. You can find me on the Texas Global website. You can also email me directly at peacecorps@austin.utexas.edu. I'm happy to meet with students and staff in person or online. Do not be shy. If you would like more information about the Peace Corps Prep Certificate Program, that is not obligatory for your application, but it helps you really align your personal strengths and goals of Peace Corps service. And it also shows that you took the extra initiative to obtain that certificate in training and more thoughtfulness towards service when you do apply. So it doesn't hurt. It definitely helps, but it's also not necessary if you don't have availability to do that certificate program. But feel free to reach out to me, reach out to other recruiters if there are restructurings happening at headquarters. So if you're not hearing back, feel free to reach out to me and I'll connect you with the appropriate person. And I wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much for considering Peace Corps service. It was a wonderful experience for me. I think it is a very unique way to really learn and take a deep dive into culture and language and really create lasting friendships and the necessary work to build peace and strengthen security for the US and the world. So thank you for considering Peace Corps service. I wish you the best of luck. Do not be shy about reaching out to me or other returned Peace Corps volunteers. We're here to support you. And thank you so much. Have a great day.